Matt Chapman is entering the final year of his deal with Toronto and will hit free agency next offseason. Many teams are in the market for the former Platinum Glover, but why would the Blue Jays even consider trading him? And finally, the Rogers Center renovations are coming along, and the latest reveal should have fans excited about attending a ball game in Toronto. We'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Got a lot to get into today, but we want to thank you all for the support that we've gotten in the new year. It's been unreal, and hopefully we can keep it going all season long.
Yeah, it's been great on the road to 6K subscribers, very close. So quick reminder, hit the subscribe button if you like the daily content. But without further ado, let's get into the main topic of the video, which is the Cubs and other teams trading for Matt Chapman. And like you said, many teams are targeting, obviously, Matt Chapman. He is our star third baseman, but only 1 year left on his deal. So I'll pop up the screenshot. We have a few regarding Matt Chapman here. And this came out a couple days ago, or 10 days ago, but it kind of came to fruition a couple days ago. So Cubby's Crib tweeted, Matt Chapman seems like an inevitable target for the Cubs. And basically it's an article that outlined this trade right here, which is Toronto Blue Jays receive Adbert Alzolay and Nelson Velasquez for Matt Chapman. And he goes on to say that, actually, before we even get into that, Peter, what are your initial thoughts on this trade? And even if trading Matt Chapman is even on the radar for the Blue Jays, because I'm not entirely sure if it is.
No, it doesn't make sense at all. I mean, yeah, he's going to hit free agency, but you made a lot of moves in this past offseason to try and win right now. So the Blue Jays, why would it make sense for them to trade their starting third baseman, a guy who played over 150 games last year for them, to a team for a couple of prospects? Adbert Alzolay and Nelson Velasquez got some potential. There's definitely something there. But man, what are we even talking about here? It doesn't make sense for the Toronto Blue Jays to trade Matt Chapman to anyone. He's a top 10 third baseman in the major leagues, and if he leaves, so be it. But you got to try and win right now, and Matt Chapman gives you the best chance to do that at third base.
Yeah, and there's a couple of tweets that go on that kind of agree with what you said, but I'll pop up what they had to say here about the trade. And it says, I foresee the Cubs having no problem moving either of these two, especially if they can extend Chapman and keep him in a Cubs uniform for another 5 years. It basically goes on to say if the Cubs don't land him via trade, I expect him to be circled towards the top of their wish list next winter. However, it makes more sense to grab and lock him up now to avoid him testing the market in 2023. Doesn't really speak much about the Blue Jays here. Obviously, it's a Cubs website. But, the fact that the whole thing starts with they have no problem moving these two if you're a Cubs fan kind of doesn't bode well for the Blue Jays. But what we'll do is whip open the trade machine and I'll show you what the values are like on the website. And they're actually fairly similar. They are fairly close, but like I agree with what you said, it doesn't seem to make too much sense from a perspective here. So this is Alzolay and Velasquez for Matt Chapman. So obviously, I think the main reason that the values are so close is simply because it's Chapman's last year, which obviously he's going to be testing for agency, and this takes a lot into account the salary. But Peter, what are your thoughts on this right here? I think it makes sense given what the evaluator uses, but from the Jays' perspective, I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of sense for this specific trade. I feel like if you were going to trade Chapman, which I don't think they will, you need more major league ready talent at the very least, or a replacement in pitching. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, if the Blue Jays were a rebuilding team or a team that was retooling, then this would make sense for them. Because Alzolay and Velasquez are two promising prospects, and Alzolay even has some experience pitching in the major leagues, and he looked pretty good as well with the Cubs. So I wouldn't mind that return if the Blue Jays were a perennial 70, 80 win team and just couldn't get out of the mud. But that's not the case. They want to win a World Series, and like I said, Matt Chapman gives them the best chance to do that. He's a top 10 third baseman in all of baseball. Some might even argue top 8, top 7, and that might not even be a stretch. So, yeah, the Cubs might want to go after him in free agency, and a lot of teams might want to go after him. And I'm not sure the Blue Jays have what it takes to re-sign him, considering that they have to extend and throw a lot of money at a bunch of other players as well. But this could be your best opportunity to win. You signed Kevin Kiermaier to a 1 year deal, Brandon Belt to a 1 year deal. You have Chris Bassett, who's not getting any younger, George Springer, who's not getting any younger. So why would you trade a guy who's in his prime for a couple of prospects? It just doesn't make sense, whether it be with the Cubs or with any other team.
Yeah, and I agree. And a couple of other things. This was from a Mets article, and they basically tweeted the same thing as the Cubs, saying that the Mets would be an ideal trade spot for Matt Chapman. They basically go on to say that it'll be centered around starters Brett Baty and Jet Williams. And while the Blue Jays have not made any efforts known publicly whether they plan to extend Chapman or not prior to him hitting free agency, they have no pressure nor reason to move him currently on a win-now club. So at least this Mets article agrees that there's not a huge, reason to move him. And I know what you were saying about the extension thing, but there was also a tweet by Jeff Blair, sorry, here saying in his podcast on the Walk-Off podcast, really started to impose his will in the clubhouse, that's Matt Chapman, towards the end of the season. And because he's an important guy to the Jays, he can see Chapman signing a long-term deal with Toronto even before Vladdy and Bo. I don't know if they would extend Chapman before Vladdy, but obviously Chapman's last year of the contract, so it's very, very possible. Would you like to see a Matt Chapman extension before a potential Vladdy extension, just because Matt Chapman's done after contracts up after this year?
No, I wouldn't. I would still extend Vladdy at all costs, although I think Matt Chapman's just as important to the team right now as Vladdy is. You might have to worry about Vladdy further down the line, but the more games that he plays, the more home runs that he hits, the more expensive he gets. So that's why I'd try to get Vladdy locked up as soon as possible. But that Mets trade was a little bit intriguing to me, but yet again, if the Jays were a rebuilding team, I would not mind Brett Baty, who's one of the top third base prospects in all of baseball. Left-handed hitter. The guy's a stud, five-tool player. But that's just not what the Blue Jays need right now. So I would try to extend Matt Chapman, as I think that helps your competitive window and it keeps it open for a little bit longer. But I would still try and extend Vladdy a little bit before that.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. But again, extending both of them hopefully isn't too far out of the question. The last
Yeah.
screenshot in
I
this
would
article.
extend him
Go ahead.
before I would extend him before Bo. I would
Yes.
extend Matt Chapman before Bo Bichette. That's for sure. But Vladdy, I think he's going to be your cornerstone for the next 10 plus years, and you can't afford to let that go.
No, completely agree. And this is the last screenshot I'll show. It's basically a guy from MLB Writer saying, I don't foresee the Blue Jays moving Chapman at all in the near future. A team in a win-now mode doesn't move one of the best defensive third basemen in the game, and the generation for that matter. But as well, Chapman is an easy qualifying offer candidate, netting a draft pick compensation should he sign elsewhere. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to trade him. This is just classic Cubs and other MLB teams hoping to get him because he would help any team in the MLB. But let's move on to the next topic now, which is Rogers Center renovations. So media was granted access today to the Rogers Center, the new Rogers Center, to see some screenshots. So I have 4 screenshots for you, and do yourselves a favor and go on Twitter, go on Reddit, and look at the other ones yourself, because we can obviously include only so many. And there's lots of videos out there about Ben Nicholson Smith and stuff like that, but we'll show you some general stuff. This is from Tim and Friends. Standing in the outfield of Rogers Center is going to be 100 times more fun. The Blue Jays have unveiled some new spots for fans to hang out during the game, including a bar right above the visitors' bullpen. So you can kind of see some of this is less of the on-field renovation. This is more, the other social stuff. So you have Park Social, which is a new bar. You have tons of other stuff like that. So that all looks super good. We have this here, which is this is the huge renovations, and the main thing that has changed is the outfield wall, which is very, very good for considering our defense has changed a lot. But Peter, do you have any thoughts? This is the big thing here. You can kind of see the wall, how it's much more different. It's more like a maze. I know you sent me a TikTok earlier. I think with the Gate podcast, it's more of a maze. What are your thoughts on all these renovations, and if I guess just your thoughts on them in general?
Oh, I'm excited to go to a ball game this year, Nick, and we'll definitely be going to a couple together as well. So I'm fired up for that. But man, it looks cool. The fan experience looks like it's been enhanced. Only the outfield renovations are going to be revealed next season, so we won't see the entire stadium be renovated or whatever. But it looks cool, and the 500 section. I mean, you're no longer in purgatory over there. You could go grab a drink and stand and interact with people. Just looks awesome, and I can't wait to go.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll pop this up one more time. Do yourselves a favor. This is kind of the biggest change at the outfield and for our outfielders. We'll be touching more on that in future videos, but go ahead and look at it yourselves on Twitter, on Reddit, and all that. There's tons of stuff out there. We can only include so much. There's lots of videos out there as well showing the full renovation, so go to that. But we'll move on to the quick final topic. I don't have a chapter for it, but Peter, you sent me this right before we recorded the videos. This was tweeted out by Ben Verlander, and it's Ben Verlander's 2023 top 5 pitching rotations. Mets 1, Yankees 2, Atlanta 3, Houston 4, and the Blue Jays at 5. So we're not going to critique the list too much. Obviously, the Jays 5, you could argue one way or another, but we're going to also talk about, just for a minute here, what it would take for the Blue Jays to actually fulfill this projection and for them to be number 5. And I think it really comes down to their top 4 and hopefully having a serviceable 5th starter. Peter, I'll let you get your take on that really quick.
Yeah, everything needs to go right for the Blue Jays to have a top five rotation, I think. And obviously, the top four, we're not going to argue that. The Yankees, second, I don't have a problem with that. They just got Carlos Rodon. Frankie Montas is their fifth starter. That's a very, very good rotation. Now, for the Toronto Blue Jays to be considered in that top five in the upper echelon of rotations in the major leagues, they need a similar season from Alek Manoah. So not much regression. If he has a 2.5 ERA, that's okay. That's a little bit of regression, but not expecting him to have a lifetime 2.24 ERA. It's just not realistic. We need Kevin Gausman to replicate that same kind of strikeout rate that he had last season. And if he can maybe get a little bit luckier, not get burned by batting average on balls in play like he did last season. He had a record breaking unlucky season, which was very hard to see. Yusei Kikuchi, we need 140 innings out of him, I think, for them to be a top five rotation. Jose Barrios has to bounce back, and Chris Bassett's got to be the innings eater that he is. So everything has to go right for the Jays to be in that top five, but I could definitely see it happening.
Yeah, he can make an argument for it. Top 10 as well. Definitely, I could say he's their top 10 right now. Top five might be a
Definitely
bit,
top
yeah,
10.
top five might be a
Yeah.
bit of a stretch depending on. Obviously, we're Jays fans, so we'll agree with it for now. But I agree, everything has to go right, and it's gonna be very interesting to see what they do. And we're super excited for the season, and we're super excited for future content. We're gonna be having live streams soon. We might have one tonight, depending on how everything goes. But thank you for all the support. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you guys in tomorrow's video.
Thanks.